Just one of those days. All right, who thinks you got something? Sorry. Okay, caffeine, hematocrit injection, consuming simple sugars. So I should just eat some candy or I'd be back Starburst right now. And I'm good to go. They're off?
Are we gonna just
There's 10 more slides and
maybe on this one.
times of other. No. Okay. Semester has gotten away from us. All right, who else thinks you got something? What should we be taking right now?
Creatine.
Creatine. Okay, why?
Because it puts water in.
Puts water into our muscle, and that's advantageous because.
So then.
Okay, so Olivia asked an important question, and I don't know if everybody got the distinction, right? Was if I take something right now, one dose, okay, one dose, not I've taken this for 3 weeks or a month or even a couple of days. Right, just right now, we gotta go exercise in an hour, right now, straight up, we'll take this, let's go. So my question, from a creatine standpoint is, if I take one dose of creatine right now, do we think that's gonna put water into my muscles or do anything? Probably not, we will get there. So, okay, so we've said caffeine, we've said something with simple sugars. We said hematocrit. What would hematocrit be? If you inject yourself with hematocrit, what are you actually injecting? Oxygen? Not. Well, it's going to help you with that, but what is it actually injecting? Red blood cells. Okay? Red blood cells. Okay. Anybody have any other things? If anybody's sitting on some red blood cells they'd like to donate, like they'd like to just share right now, that seems great. We probably all benefit from, like, let's all take some red blood cells. Okay. Anything else? Go ahead. BCAAs, okay. Branch chain amino acids. Okay. Okay. We may run into the same problem there that we have with the creatine, but a very reasonable thing. Anybody have a pre-workout on you? But it has your pre-workout in your backpack, you're just gonna pull it out, mix it up. Where are my bros? Okay, because that would be the thing, right? Like, let's look at what's in pre-workout. Okay, we'll come back to it. Living.
Beta alanine.
Beta alanine. So it's interesting. If you take the beta alanine, you will definitely feel like it's doing something. Right? You feel a little itchy, you feel a little like sort of skin that's kind of weird and crawly and flush. It varies across people. Some people don't feel anything. But that's a very common experience people would take beta alanine. Is that your skin anyway, it does something. We'll talk about what it does in a second. Anybody have anything else? That's it. I have through class made you all realize that nothing works except for caffeine. And you're all just like, no, that's all it is, Dr. Black. Right? Disabused us of all of this nonsense in these sorts of ways. Okay. Keep those lists. We're gonna do a couple more things here in a minute. All right. But overall, as I said, an ergogenic aid is something that you take that improves performance, okay? To improve performance, and this was gonna be kind of the next step for what you guys wrote down, is if I want your performance to go up an hour from now, okay? If I give you something, it has to, in that short period of time, have some noticeable, measurable effect on some physiological parameter that determines your performance. So it needs to increase force production, right? It needs to do something to increase endurance. It needs to make your VO2 max go up, or, right, something of that nature. Or it needs to increase your skill at a particular activity. The third one, if you can figure something out that can do that, then you're gonna be a trillionaire. Okay? We can't all of a sudden give you something and in an hour make you, right, a good pickleball player if you're not a good pickleball player. We can't teach that skill. You can't just take a pill for all of that. So we're really stuck on the first two. Okay? We're kind of stuck on the first two. And I want to give a little bit of nuance on this because I think it will be helpful as we kind of progress forward on things. When I say it increases force production, okay, there's very few things, and if you take it now, you're stronger immediately. There's very few things, the red blood cells aside, that if I give them to you now, make your VO2 max go up right now. Okay? That's tough. So what we typically tend to see with ergogenic aids are, I give you something and as you exercise, your ability to generate force is going to begin to decline. You're going to fatigue over time. And the improvement in force production is actually, it prevents some of the decline, or it slows the decline in force. Okay? Or maybe it's something like in the heat, right? It's hot, you get cardiovascular drift, so VO2 max slowly drifts down over time during exercise, and we give you something and it blunts that decline. Does that make sense, guys? Okay? Because the vast majority of things are going to fall that actually work. They're going to do that. Okay? They're going to do that. So you got to think about that. The other thing, and this gets to the question that Olivia asked, and I wanna present this again in a nuanced way, is there are a few things that will work. Take it now, it will work. Take it during your bout of exercise, and it will work. There are some other things though that work, but they work by, I take them repeatedly over time before I compete for several weeks or months. Or I take them in conjunction with my training and maybe it augments my training response. Okay. And so in that particular way, we have to have some nuance on maybe it's an ergogenic training aid. It lets you train harder every day, or it enhances your training response. Creatine might be a good example of that. Versus, I've done all of my training, I've done all my stuff, I am where I am, can I take something right now to make what I'm going to do in an hour better? Okay. Both things can be ergogenic, but they can be ergogenic for different reasons, and there's just a level of nuance that's going to be there. Okay. You guys follow me on all of that? All right. Traditionally, some of you are NCAA athletes. We have an NCAA anymore. I don't really understand. I don't know what's happening. There are substances that are banned. Okay. Now, collegiately, they only check for these things in urine, right? You guys signed some waivers and things that you probably maybe have been randomly tested, right before a conference competition or a national, but they test for things in urine. The IOC, the International Olympic Committee, WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, if you're a professional athlete, then oftentimes they make you be subjected to blood testing. And blood testing is way more accurate. Okay. Your urine levels, things in your urine, they check for caffeine in your urine. Okay. Well, that depends upon hydration status, kidney functions, a whole bunch of stuff. Whereas if we could check for caffeine in a blood sample, we'd be much similar, because by the time the caffeine gets to your urine, it's reflecting what you did yesterday or the day before, right? Or maybe if it's in the evening, what happened in the morning. Whereas a blood sample can tell us much closer to kind of what's happening right on those things. But these are banned substances. There are definitely things that work, okay? So in a normal semester, if we had more time, I would show you guys all of these pictures and be like, what do we think? Is testosterone an ergogenic aid? Is growth hormone an ergogenic aid? Okay? And so there's a bit of nuance. If I inject you with testosterone right now, probably not going to do that much better right now. If I inject you with testosterone every day for 12 weeks while you're training, you're going to get huge. And that's going to increase force production, and that's probably going to be beneficial. One of the other things that tends to work ergogenically from testosterone and growth hormone, any kind of hormonal supplementation, is recovery, right? I know that I've told you guys a whole bunch of stuff. There's not a lot of things that work for recovery beyond protein, eating, rest. Really, really good for recovery. But steroids would be, because they promote tissue repair. Okay? They definitely promote tissue repair. So these would absolutely be ergogenic, but maybe just not in a one-shot kind of dose sort of thing. Okay? So we'll put those on there, right? And then I say, okay, let's look at all of these things. You guys think Gatorade is ergogenic? Absolutely it is, right? For certain types of exercise. Long distance, endurance exercise, especially when it's hot outside. Yes, it's water, it's carbs, maintains blood glucose, maintains plasma volume, right? Prevents overheating, prevents depletion of glycogen and blood glucose and those things. It can absolutely be ergogenic. Okay, so if you're going to go run a marathon right now in an hour, start drinking Gatorade now. Water. Same concept, right? Water is ergogenic. If you're going to be sweating a bunch, it prevents cardiovascular drift. What about Coke? Anybody think drinking Coke is ergogenic? A couple of y'all are shaking your head no. Why not? How is Coke different than Gatorade? Yes. Does it have water in it? Does it have carbs in it? Okay. It unfortunately no longer, because they're cowards, does not contain cocaine. Okay. That's why it's called Coke. It used to have cocaine in it. People are like, wow, this is the greatest thing ever. No shit. I'm not advocating for cocaine use, even at any dose, right? Drugs are illegal, drugs are bad, right? Some other drugs, all those things. But originally it had cocaine in it. Okay? They weren't, I think it was anyway. That's a different kind of soda addiction in those ways. Okay? Now, if I gave you the choice, you're running a race, it's before a race, you're running, do you want to drink Gatorade or do you want to drink a Coke? Or pick your whatever, your Mountain Dew, whatever your soda of choice. You probably would rather drink Gatorade, right? Olivia, now you want to Coke?
No, but one of my teammates, she doesn't have, she would, like froth it so that the carbonation would go away and then just drink it so it has like.
She drinks black Coke.
Yeah.
Okay.
It works, but.
It absolutely, so the problem with, soda absolutely, in some ways, more ergogenic because of the caffeine, although that 12-ounce can of Coke has like 37 milligrams of caffeine, which for most of us, right, we're a pretty caffeinated group. For most of us, that's not doing anything, right? We're just barely getting started on all of that, but it's better than no caffeine that the Gatorade has. The problem is the carbonation makes it difficult to drink quickly. It may upset your stomach and some of those things. But it's the same idea, right? So the same thing, coffee, right? Is coffee ergogenic? Absolutely. It's probably, if you can take it, the most ergogenic thing of anything on there. high dose of caffeine, higher dose, depending upon how you take it, right? And it has some carbs. Maybe you don't want to get a giant like mocha or something with, like whipped cream and everything on there. Although again, more calories, fat is potentially beneficial. Higher dose of caffeine, it has some carbs, it has some water in the midst of all of this. So absolutely, it can be ergogenic. Okay. Creatine. In a single dose, probably not, right? Most pre-workout now, or a lot of pre-workout has creatine in it. It's not doing a whole lot. They're trying to sell you something with that. Because it's not a high enough dose to maintain your loading sort of phase in most of them if you're actually supplementing the creatine. But it sounds good, right? Like, oh, it's got creatine. Creatine gives you quick energy, which is correct, but somewhat misleading, right? Not going to help in a one-shot dose. But if you take it repeatedly, absolutely. If you're a responder, it may enhance training adaptation, but it may also, you will have more creatine phosphate, which if you're doing repeated sprints or you're doing sort of repeated like sets when you're working out and those kinds of things, or you're in a competition, does that? Yeah, probably gonna work. Whey protein. In a single dose, no, right? I mean, probably not. If you take it, you gotta mix it up. Maybe it would actually be useful for endurance exercise because it's calories and water, or milk or something. But there's nothing sort of magic about whey protein in a single dose. The big deal is just if you are a little bit deficient or if you need a little bit more because you're doing high intensity stuff and you need to recover, then it can in fact be somewhat helpful there. Okay. One of my favorite things on earth that I don't get to have, because if I get it, then Ellis wants it and people get unhappy. And that's chocolate milk. We think chocolate milk would be ergogenic? Yeah. It's water with carbs and fat in it. Of course it's there. In a single dose, like during endurance exercise, chocolate milk would absolutely be ergogenic. Is it beneficial from a recovery standpoint? Probably a little bit. It's got some protein and those kinds of things in there. And we do know that some protein supplementation, just having a meal after a heavy body exercise, does sort of help us recover a little bit better for the next day. So those are things that can work. Now, I don't know that we make these things anymore. Part of this, I'm old enough to have lived through the real Wild West days, which we may be returning to, right? On a lot of things. They are, they've cut a bunch of jobs with the FDA and a bunch of cutting back on regulations on how we inspect things in food and all of this, which, everybody can kind of have their own sort of opinions on where we're going, but hydroxycut used to be a very popular sort of diet pill. And in the original iteration, it had something in it called ephedra. Ephedra is meth. Okay, it's meth. I mean, it's not quite as addictive, but I mean, that's what it is. Do you know why people buy cold medicine? To make meth. Which weirdly in Oklahoma you don't have to, but when I lived in Mississippi, you had to like sign on to a registry when you went to the pharmacy or you went to Walmart or the pharmacy to buy to buy cold medicine. They wouldn't sell you more than a certain amount in a given month in an effort to prevent people from commercially buying a bunch and then taking it into your basement and cooking meth. We're breaking back and all of those things. Okay. Pseudoephedra. Sudafed has pseudoephedra. That's the meth. Okay. And so methamphetamine, it is a stimulant, very powerful stimulant. They can't sell ephedra anymore because people would take this and it would dehydrate people and it would mess up really the regular core body temperature, right? And you couple that because it's a diet pill, you increase urine output, you lose water weight, and so it was very dangerous in that way. So they banned the ephedra. Now you do this, and we just went like one biochemical product before or after on all of those things. We sidestepped that. But these are these things. There's these other diet pills from the 80s. Dexatrim mostly just has a bunch of caffeine in it in the midst of all of that. But they're stimulants, right? They're things that are meant to stimulate or mimic epinephrine and norepinephrine, stimulate metabolism, raise caloric expenditure. What we do know is that these things are good for one-off bouts, right? Especially endurance exercise. So if I say that now, it is almost impossible. Not completely, it's almost impossible to give you anything right now and make you a better like powerlifter or make your maximal force output or your maximal ability to jump or do something. One-off high force activities, we don't have a great ability to have any effect on those things. Yeah. Endurance exercise, we absolutely can, either by maintaining fluid balance, by supplementing with carbohydrates, keep our glucose up, or by taking these stimulants that mimic epinephrine and norepinephrine and prevent the loss of force production to some extent over time. So it's kind of a weird thing. If whatever you're gonna do is I gotta bench press against my roommate to see who's gonna get the bigger bedroom next year or whatever in an hour, we probably can't help. But if you're gonna have to run a 5K against them to see who gets the bigger bedroom, we can do some things. Okay. These things most of the time you can buy over the counter now. Supplements are very mildly regulated. They're not really regulated by the FDA. All they have to prove is that taking it is not gonna like immediately cause harm. The bar is very, very low. You don't have to, there's nothing about they actually have to work or do anything. They can't advertise falsely. If they advertise that it is for wellness, but it doesn't like cure a cold or something, there's ways to get around. So you can get these things. I would caution everyone about stuff that has stimulants in it, right? Those are the ones that can be in many ways the sort of the most dangerous, especially if you're trying to do like weight loss and exercise and that kind of stuff, okay? EPO. Yep. This is the Lance Armstrong magic drug. Okay. Synthetic erythropoietin stimulates red blood cell growth. Now, a one-shot deal today, not going to have more red blood cells in an hour, but within a couple of days of taking this, you're absolutely going to have more red blood cells, right? And there is nothing more powerful to increase aerobic exercise performance to make VO2 max go up than having more red blood cells. Of all of the things that you guys can do, that's the thing. Okay. Greater blood volume with greater hematocrit percentage absolutely makes VO2 max go up. So EPO is wildly ergogenic. I think I told you guys that in WADA and those folks, they don't just test for EPO. It's hard to because you make something anyway, but they test hematocrit percentage. And they will like call and say, okay, you have 6 hours to get to an approved place and we need blood today, or we're suspending you wherever you are in the world. And they will check your hematocrit percentage, and then they'll check it again in a couple of weeks. And if the absolute level is too high, they know that it can't usually naturally get higher than maybe 51 to 53%. And then they check it over time to see how it fluctuates in season out of season for these sort of runners and cyclists and those things. It's called a physiological passport. So they do some things there. Tums. Strangely, Tums is ergogenic. You know the main ingredient in Tums? Sodium bicarbonate. It neutralizes acid. So it will neutralize acid in your stomach, right? So you don't have an upset stomach, you don't have heartburn or something. But it also increases bicarbonate in the blood, which lets you buffer more lactic acid. So especially if you're a sprinter, and you have to do repeated sprinting things where you're making high levels of lactic acid and having to push, say you're a 400-meter runner or an 800-meter runner, probably even a miler or something at this point, this might be helpful. A word of caution. The side effect of having too much sodium bicarbonate is diarrhea. So you may be able to run better, but you may also be running to the bathroom. Okay, it is a laxative in that particular way. So it works. There's good scientific evidence that supports it. But it is in the high doses needed. There may be some unwanted side effects. on all of that. Pasta. Pasta is ergogenic. Food is ergogenic. Especially high carb foods in a couple of days before you're going to do a nervous exercise. Eat more carbs, go to Olive Garden, get all you can eat fettuccine Alfredo or spaghetti or whatever your thing is, eat all the breadsticks, and your muscle glycogen levels increase. Right? Your muscle glycogen levels increase. So especially for very long-term endurance exercise, things longer than an hour and a half or so, having more glycogen can be beneficial. Don't eat pasta now if you're going to run in an hour. Yesterday, the day before, load up on the pasta. Okay? Beer. Could beer be ergogenic? What is beer? You guys know what's in beer? Wheat. What is wheat? Carb. What else in beer mostly? You schedule a brewery tour for everybody. That's fine. We can do that. Right, to understand the process. I have a friend and she's a biology professor. She's a plant pathologist by training. But she does a study abroad every year. I'm very jealous. And I think they go to Scotland or Ireland, they go to the Guinness factory. And it's part of their thing, but they study yeast, they talk about fermentation, they do biology of all of this, understanding microorganisms and these things, right? But beer is mostly water, right? So it's water and it's carbs. We know that could be ergogenic. Now, the alcohol in it could be problematic, right? Could be problematic. There's probably, right, one beer. Probably you might even get a little bit of desensitization, a little bit of pain reduction, a little bit of something. 5 beers and your skill level, right? You're intoxicated and your ability to do these skills and things is going to go way down. Blood skills drop. So in the 70s and things, like cyclists would drink, like in the Tour de France, like they would drink beer while they were before there was Gatorade and these things, they would do a little bit of this. Okay? Again, I'm not advocating for that. Please, if you're not 21, don't drink. If you are 21. And you choose to drink, do it safely, don't drive, all the things, right? We're here. But it could potentially be ergogenic. There's actually been a lot of research. I had a student at Ole Miss that was what she wanted to do for her thesis project, was to bring people in and give them sort of different types of beer and alcohol to try to figure out where the sort of what the optimum range for exercise and motor skills and those things were. There's actually a lot of publications, strangely enough, on all of that. You go to a race, you don't really see a lot of people having beer during the race, but that's kind of a thing. Okay. All right. So what are you going to get asked about on the test? Okay. There will be questions about, we tend to group ergogenic aids into categories. And roughly those categories are pharmacological aids, hormonal aids, a physiological aid, or a nutritional aid. And some of the things that fall into each one of these are going to seem a little backwards to you. So I want to draw some attention there. Okay. A pharmacological aid basically is a drug. Okay. Primarily a stimulant. Okay. Caffeine is actually a drug. Do you guys know that caffeine is a drug? Okay. You can insert doses, you don't have to have a prescription, but it's a drug. So think that. Okay. Diet pills, things with caffeine, pseudoephedrine, cold medicine, et cetera, et cetera. Did I tell you guys, if I told you guys the story, like the week before that we knew that my wife was pregnant, you could get, she has allergies, and you can buy what we call the leaded version of like Claritin, the Claritin D that you got to get from behind the counter, right? And you take it, and you like don't sleep for 3 days and things afterwards. Again, the decongestant part, it has meth in it, basically, right? It's very effective. Well, she has allergies, and she had taken one, we were riding our bikes around in Oklahoma City, and we were not that great, we hadn't been doing it that much, and she was just completely kicking my ass, right? And we figured out afterwards that it was because she had taken the L32 thing. She was feeling great with all the stimulant stuff that was in there. And then the next week we figure out that she's pregnant. And we're like, oh God, is this bad? And all of those kinds of things. And then she likes to think, no, she was kicking my ass because one, she's better than me, she's superhuman, which she is, but also that's a pharmacological agent, okay? A hormonal agent, you may think of testosterone and growth hormone and those things as a drug, which in some contexts they are, but that's a hormonal agent. Okay, primarily the hormonal agents are not things that are ergogenic in a single dose. They're much more ergogenic with multiple doses and kind of training aid types of things. Could erythropoietin be a hormonal agent? Yes. Could it also be a physiological agent? Also, yes. Okay. Generally, a physiological agent would be something that's not really a drug, not really a hormone, but it works by specifically changing the physiology, interacting with the metabolism or something, that's going on. So blood doping, right? Putting red blood cells back in, physiological agent. Oxygen loading, not that beneficial here, but go to Denver, much better. Okay, much better. Go higher than that, even better still. Or bicarbonate, they enhance or alter the physiological responses, and then what we think of as nutritional agents. So you could argue that creatine is a nutritional agent, you could argue that it's a physiological agent, it's going to be kind of somewhere crossing both of those, but then carbohydrate loading, drinking water, having a sports drink, things that are going to help with glucose and glycogen levels and maintain plasma when you're sweating those things, that would be a nutritional. Okay. And so if you look through the slides, I give some kind of more specific examples of like what's going to fall under each one of these, what their mechanism of action is going to be, the proposed benefits, and then some things that we know have been scientifically shown to be the actual benefits. And then I try to put some side effects down on the rest of these kinds of things. Okay. Right. Pharmacological, caffeine, ephedrine, amphetamines, things of that nature. They mimic epi, norepi. They absolutely increase metabolic rate. They do tend to increase heart rate. They do tend to decrease fatigue and lower perception of effort. They also sometimes function as appetite suppressants. But if you are an anxious person like me, these things can make you nervous. They can give you tremors. They can dehydrate you. They can be very dangerous if taken in relatively high doses. Okay. So we do know that if you're already anxious, caffeine very often makes you more anxious. Although if you're like me and you kind of spike the anxiety scale at the top anyway, then like what's a little more? We have a thing called a ceiling effect. So we've got that. Okay. Additional pharmacological agents like diuretics, diet pills, diet drinks, things of that nature, things that again, they're going to tend to have a stimulant in them. They tend to increase urine production, so they can dehydrate you. So in some ways, if you're dehydrated, that's going to have a performance. They will oftentimes take diet pills to mask other drugs when you're doing drug testing, because it dilutes your urine, and then it dilutes the effects of like other things that are going to be there. Not a lot of like actual benefits beyond weight loss in these things, although weight loss can be ergogenic in and of itself. So be careful about these kinds of things. Pretty simple stuff on anabolic hormones, right? Muscle mass goes up, doesn't really affect VO2. I talk a lot about the risk of these things. Don't take steroids, guys. Don't take steroids. Guys, girls, everybody collectively. Not great. Okay. I talked about EPO there and those loading. We talked about the bicarb. Let me just really quickly mention a couple of things about a drug versus a supplement. Okay. Caffeine is a drug. Creatine is a supplement. Okay. They are regulated differently for now. Okay, but the Food and Drug Administration, their guidelines for dietary supplements are, it's not a drug, so you don't even have a doctor to say that you can take it, but you cannot claim to have purely therapeutic or health improving or disease preventing things. That's it. It was a law passed in 1994. It removed a lot of the restrictions, and the regulation is that basically, as long as there is no apparent risk, we call it a supplement and we move on. In the same way, if you're going to sell soda, the caffeine content has to be low enough that it's not called an energy drink. If it's over, you got to call it an energy drink. Neither of them are that widely regulated beyond, again, right, does it cause any real harm? Not a lot of those things are going to be there, but that's the distinction between energy drinks. And I say it's a multi-million, it's a multi-$100 billion business, right? So Red Bull is an empire because they sell energy drinks, right? Monster is owned, I think Coke owns Monster, on all of those things. Some of the other ones are all owned by Pepsi. Basically, Coke or Pepsi owns everything. Pepsi owns Gatorade, Coke owns Powerade. They're kind of the ones, and then they buy all those other things out through there. But it's a huge business. Okay, it's a huge business. And so I want you guys to think about being informed consumers of this. Okay. There are some actual ergogenic benefits of things that are supplements and that are energy drinks and things like that. But there's a lot of stuff that they advertise, and it's very, very minimal. So keep that in mind, kind of as we go through. Okay. What else do I have? What is a supplement? I'm not going to ask you guys questions about drugs versus supplements very much. We talked about creatine some. This is the effect of dehydration. So I'm not going to make you guys responsible for anything beyond here. Okay. All of the stuff on, there's a lot of evidence on sports drinks and water versus a sports drink. And they study things, they put probes down the throat, and they measure how quickly fluid leaves your stomach. Well, gastric emptying and these things. There's a lot of evidence going back and forth on those things. The short answer is sports drinks work, especially when it's hot, and especially during long things that last more than an hour and a half. Okay, but you're not going to be responsible for anything. Okay. All right, maybe Friday, no rain. We'll see. Okay, we will do Jeopardy on Friday. Ty has the stuff up. If you want to make up an assignment, please do those and get those in. All right, and we'll see you then. Okay. All right, we'll see you guys Friday. All right, if I went back with you. Yeah, sure.